of International Relations, Lindiwe Sisulu, was expected to meet ambassadors from several African countries today to discuss a recent spate of attacks against foreigners in the city of Durban. The talks come after dozens of people, many from Malawi, were forced from their homes by angry mobs that have also looted shops. In studio to help us understand this wave of violence against foreigners in South Africa is Professor Israel Kodiaga, Regional Director, Southern Dela International, also a political affairs commentator. Professor, welcome to studio. And let's start off, first of all, with xenophobia in South Africa not being a new thing. But maybe we start off with what we know now. And there seem to have been a target towards those from Malawi. Is there a reason why this would be the case? Why Malawi?
Thank you. I think, Michael, we would be missing the point if we look at the isolated case of xenophobia, and particularly the one targeting Malawi. If you allow me, I would request that we prosecute the whole concept of xenophobia from its historicity and then look at the trends over the years and the reactions, both internal reactions and external reactions, and then we look at the overall African or South African problem so that we will be able to place xenophobia where it belongs.
All right, let's start with the history. Where did xenophobia begin from? Because to be fair, xenophobia in South Africa is not something new. It's something that, and it comes in waves. Maybe now because they're approaching elections, but what is the history?
Xenophobia in South Africa is as old as that country. And it is older than the independent South Africa, which came into place in 1994. We would trace it back without going too far. As early as 1984, we had between 50,000 to 350,000 Mozambicans moving into South Africa due to the problems which are in Mozambique. It was followed by Zimbabweans, and later followed by people from the Congo region in 1993, 1994. And of course, as the numbers were growing, certain things happened. And these were, one, the migrants were put in Bantustans by the South African government and were made to stay in those places. But the migrants also got opportunities to go and work in hotels. They went to work in shops. They went to do all sorts of odd jobs, which unfortunately the ordinary South Africans loathed. As a result, the numbers of foreigners in South Africa was growing, and the ordinary South Africans were feeling, of course, erroneously, that they were being disadvantaged or dispossessed. But that also has a history connected to their attitude to labor, their attitude to work. Ordinary South Africans look at work as punitive. They would not want to work. If you ask them to work in the farms, they associate it to the era of apartheid.
Yes.
If you ask them to work in shops and places, they associate it with it's something less for them. So that is part of the problem. Again, the history of the African National Congress is also here, because the ANC over the years was a communist party, and it promised South Africans a lot of things. Now, come independence, none of those were delivered. Now the people have been asking for jobs. The people have been asking for better life. What then does the political class offer? They point fingers, and they point fingers to these people. So if you look at the background and the history, you'll find that as early as the year 2000, there were 7 Zimbabweans who were killed on the grounds of xenophobia. It was followed by, in 2006, when the Zimbabweans were given 10 days to leave their settlements. And in 2005, 21 Somalis were killed, and again, the same, that's 2006, and later 26 more Somalis were killed. Then, of course, you go to 2008, then you find the xenophobic attacks spread all over. That's why I said we could not zero it
into what's happening now.
Yeah, it spread to Eastern Cape. We had it in Jeffreys Bay. We had it into East London, at Raleigh Ridge, and many other places. And in all these places, you find the people who were actually spreading the xenophobic message or who was attacking the foreigners had a message. And the message was Umshiniwami. Umshiniwami is a common terminology which was used by Zuma. Bring me the machine gun. So you can see the connectedness between the politics and xenophobia. And it went on. And you find that later, there was the South African Migration Project, which was commissioned to study the whole concept of xenophobia. And the project came up with very interesting reports. 21% of South Africans believed that foreigners, red Africans from other countries, must not be allowed into South Africa. And 64% said that Africans from other countries should be allowed, but with stringent conditionalities. So that alone tells you that this is something which is deeply rooted. Then another commission was set, which by the Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation in the same year. And this was basically interviewing the police officers. And 87% of the police stated in no uncertain terms that all the violence in Johannesburg, all forms of crime, prostitutions, muggings, and also on, are being carried out by non or illegal immigrants from other countries. That, therefore, confirms the attitude. It would therefore not be a surprise that the police would look elsewhere when the South Africans are attacking foreigners in that country.
Okay.
Now, coming forward, there has been the Somalian issue, which has even been an issue of study, where the South Africans accused the Somalis of taking over the businesses, and none other than a minister, the junior minister, Zulu Lindiwe, stated that foreigners owning businesses in South Africa, and then I quote, foreigners owning businesses in South Africa must not expect to coexist mutually with South African business people unless they teach them their business secrets. So it is a situation of attitude.
Okay, and that then brings into focus the question of how South Africa internally, before we look at the external, how South Africa has reacted in addressing that, because evidently there is a process of integrating even those who possibly were not educated, those who are not skilled, into what we'd call the white-collar jobs, because the issue, from what you've mentioned, started off with the attitude towards especially menial jobs, because they related this to apartheid, because these are the kind of jobs that they did. But do they understand, have they done anything to address the fact that it takes time to get everybody into the system? I know the government, through its initiative, has got, for instance, quotas where blacks must be represented even in leadership. But is that working?
No, it is not working. And I think what the South African government has done to address the issue is actually one of treating the symptoms as opposed to the disease.
To the disease.
And like I told you, the first xenophobic attacks happened during the reign of Thabo Mbeki. And in 2009 May, he instituted, that's the first time that he signed an order authorizing the police, the military, to actually intervene on xenophobic attacks. Thereafter, the regime of Zuma witnessed a lot of cases of xenophobic attacks, where Zuma is quoted to have regretted the killings, but said that those Africans should have not been there in the first place. And that attack came after the Zulu king had actually warned them. And you'll find that every attack follows a warning. It's a pattern. When there was the warning by the Zulu king, it happened. And Zuma gave knee-jerk reaction. And recently, it is Ramaphosa who spoke and stated things which I would not state before this television. And those, therefore, what followed are the attacks. So it's like the attackers are following a pattern. So the South African political class are using xenophobia to cover their inefficiencies. They are using xenophobia to actually sidestep and move away from reality.
Would it then be accurate to say that this is a problem that is being whipped up by the political class for them to cover up, their inefficiencies?
Not that it is, that it could be, it is. Because even the earlier attack, when a commission was done, they found that a junior councillor, Mpumelelo, was actually the one inciting the people. So we are saying the political class in South Africa have not addressed the South African issues. That is number one. And then number two, the South African people themselves are, by the admission of Ramaphosa, are a very ungrateful lot. Because over the years, they were in all the African countries, and they were being hosted and assisted to date,
they don't want to.
They have turned against the very hands that fed them. Zimbabwe lost so much hosting South Africans. Mozambique lost so much hosting South Africans. They were in Uganda, they were in Tanzania, they were all over. But today they look at others as lesser mortals. So one, it is a political problem. And then there are only three things that maybe I would say by way of wrapping up what could generally be the problem. The problem of xenophobia in South Africa is not different from the problem in Kenya or in Sudan or any other African countries. Although ordinarily we want to use other lenses to look at that. The same way that we have had clashes in Eldoret or any other parts of the country, it's the same thing. What is happening is that Africa has a unique problem. We have not actually detribalized the continent. And South Africa is one such case, detribalization. All the South African presidents or leaders who assumed power assumed the structure which was the colonial one, where communities were set into blocks of tribes, which served the colonial system. Those who assumed power naturally enjoyed it. And because it served them, so cantonizing and segregating people on account of tribes has worked for them. And it continues to work for them. Number two.
We need to wind up.
Number two. The other thing is that South Africa, like other African countries, has not addressed the issue of democratization and governance. These are governance problems where the leaders who are elected to serve do not actually serve. Immediately they're elected, they assume that they're masters of the people they're supposed to serve. And the third one, which is unique to South Africa, is deracialization. And South Africa has not been deracialized right from independence of 1994. And this racialization was actually an event of 1909 to 1913, when Louis Botha and General Smuts and his own people, friends, assumed power and claimed an independent South Africa, where 90% of South African land went into the hands of the white men, and the remaining 10% is what was in the hands of the black people. Having not addressed that matter, the behavior of the South Africans today is not different from the behavior of poultry in a poultry coop, where they are having mites and they are having related problems. Instead of allowing the farmer to fumigate and address the problem, they are busy cannibalizing each other.
We need to wind up, Professor Kodiaga. Maybe just one question. Somebody might be watching this and thinking, wow, South Africa is a dangerous place to go. You have lived there. Is it dangerous to go there as a foreigner?
My answer to that is yes and no. The yes aspect is that there's no doubt you'll be attacked in certain townships and certain places of South Africa. So you cannot just tell people, go to South Africa. The no aspect, it depends on where you are, what you do, and in which places you go to.
All right, Professor, we have to wind up right there. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, or rather this afternoon, on Bottom Line Africa. And well, we now continue with other stories that are making headlines. And in the preparations for planned military activities, hundreds of soldiers from Somalia's